What drives us? My name is Russell Frost. I am your host. And look, next to me, the illustrious John Voelcker, writer extraordinaire for every important automotive journal that exists on the planet today. Everyone, in every language, over the entire. I'm doing it again, aren't I, John? I'm sorry.
We call this hyperbole. I write for a few outlets, the proudest of which, or the best known of which, is Car and Driver. Take from there.
Just a little unimportant thing that no one reads, really. So it's like having a blog.
What a lovely day it is.
John, so nice to see you. Thank you for spending some time with us today. I do have an agenda, and I should disclose that. I know you have an item you want to talk about, and I've been wanting to discuss with you your feelings on PHEVs and charging range, because I think we disagree a little bit. And every once in a while, I like disagreeing with somebody who's smarter than I am. And that is you. No, that's you. That's you. As opposed to some rando on Twitter that, just kind of argle-bargle. So, you know what? Maybe you want to talk about, if you want to intro the thing that, because I haven't even actually read the story about Nada and Chargeway. So
this morning at 11 o'clock, I actually broke a story, which is always fun. The National Auto Dealers Association is partnering with Chargeway, who I know we've talked about before on this site, to make them a partner to help educate auto dealers and through them new car shoppers about EV charging specifically, which to my way of thinking may be the biggest source of misunderstanding, just sort of lack of knowledge, not only among new car shoppers, but actually among dealerships. Oh. And there was a Sierra Club survey that's linked in the article that talks about the fact that when they did secret shopper stuff, going out to dealerships asking about electric cars in 2019, 3/4 of the dealers didn't have any electric cars and essentially said, no, they don't exist, not here. But this is a very nice gasoline car for you.
Right.
And of the ones that did, a substantial minority couldn't explain incentives from the federal and state governments, could not explain charging rates, and in about 1 in 10 dealers, in fact, their electric car, their sort of sample car, was so discharged they couldn't do a test drive. They hadn't even charged it up. So there are issues with dealers. I've written about that for 10 years in Green Car Reports. What is interesting and important about this announcement is that the National Auto Dealers Association is the umbrella group for the state auto dealers associations, which are known for their lobbying might, among other things. And they have a lot of lawyers and a lot of funds to give to a lot of state politicians to make franchise laws go their way. That's a separate discussion having to do largely with Tesla and the other companies that want to sell EVs directly. But the importance of this discussion is that NADA or NADA or whatever has finally recognized the pain point for their dealers in educating not only the folks who walk into their showrooms, but their own damn staff about what EV charging is. Level 2 charging, 240 volts overnight, different from DC fast charging, which you can't have at home, different types of DC fast charging, different speeds, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. And they've partnered with Chargeway to do that education. The dealers can draw on Chargeway as a partner of NADA and, benefit from their experience with Oregon car dealers, where they had prototyped their program, which is not just the graphic sort of representation of charging stations that many people know them for, right, colored dots with speeds, but in fact, kiosks in showrooms that let salespeople work with new car shoppers to say, okay, well, you need to go visit grandma. You live here. You need to go visit grandma over here. Let's key it in. Oh, look, the Chargeway system is saying you can do that perfectly well in an electric car. You just stop right here and charge for 30 minutes. And that's how you use electric cars, which gets people over the hump of not only not knowing a thing about how EVs are charged, but not knowing that any EV chargers exist in their state or their county or their city or whatever. And so you show them all the chargers, and then you say, let's talk about your particular usage for a car. And they can map it all out. Chargeway has a cell phone app and so forth. So the idea here is that finally, the car dealers and their unified body have said, we have a big problem here. We're going to have to sell a bucket load of electric cars in the next 5 and 10 years, way more than we're selling now across all models and yes, pickup trucks. We don't know how to talk about this stuff. Enter Chargeway, and Nada is officially saying, you know what? Work with these guys. They know we have looked, and there was actually language in the press release saying we assessed a whole bunch of different ways to educate shoppers and everybody else about charging, and Chargeway was the best. We have decided that what they did was better than anyone else's, so we are partnering with them. That's an important story, even if it's a little wonky, just because I've been on the kick for 18 months of saying people don't understand EV charging. It's a real impediment to getting shoppers over the hump to considering electric cars.
We've had Matt on the show several times. He's a great guy, and I couldn't have been more happy. But for somebody who's worked, this is what he's been working for years now. Is I'm getting this out and making it easier for consumers.
I went back and looked. I actually wrote about Chargeway 4 years ago when he first pioneered it at the fourth conference in Portland. And I hadn't realized it had been that long, but he has been slogging away. He figured out how to bring in all the partners, including the local utilities. That's the other thing about Chargeway, is that dealers basically never have to think about their local electric utility aside from whoever it is that pays their bill once a month. They aren't used to thinking about, well, you may need to talk to your utility or an electrician about installing a home charging station, but did you know your local utility has this special program to install a charging station? That's just not something that car dealers have ever thought about, had to think about. Chargeway wraps that in too and says, okay, if you live in this neighborhood, you're eligible for this particular incentive.
I remember when Matt first showed me that kiosk, and I was super impressed. I mean, I think that is a killer dealer tool to use because, again, let's be clear, most car dealers aren't going to work harder than they have to, especially selling a niche product as it is now, when they'd much rather sell what they've been selling all their lives. And things like the kiosk make it really easy to graphically go, here's your route, as you just said, and there's the charging station. It's no big deal. Everything's fine. You're going to be good.
I think what actually sold them, it sounded like from some of the language, was not just the kiosks, which are going to be an expensive thing to replicate in, thousands of car dealerships.
Sure.
But the fact that Chargeway has a web plugin for the systems that dealers use. So if you're sort of leafing, because 80% of people do web research, including dealer sites, before they ever step into a dealership. The dealers can now plug in Chargeway so that when you call up an electric car, there's this thing that says, curious about charging, enter I don't know how it works. I haven't actually used it, but I assume it's something in the order of, here's your address, here are the charging stations near you. And by the way, do you want to sort of test it out? It's a web plugin that plugs into the systems, the very specialized systems dealers use. That apparently was what got Nada over the hump to say, okay, it's not just in showrooms, it's where people start their research with our dealers. We can plug it into the dealer systems and the dealer websites.
Wow. Well, that's great. I can't think of anybody that I know that's worked harder on that specific issue than Matt. And exactly. Good for them. And good for us if finally maybe the dealers are going to do something to maybe try and accidentally sell an electric car once in a while.
There's that hint of cynicism again, Frost. We've warned you about that. Never get ahead in the corporate hierarchy with that kind of attitude. Straighten up, fly right, parrot the corporate propaganda, and you too can be fired 18 months before you're eligible for retirement.
And there's nothing wrong with everything that Stellantis makes.
It's the American way.
It's
now let's talk about plugins.
More muscle cars. So you and I have kind of had a disagreement. And I don't know that we know about that. You know what I mean? I think we have actually on Twitter. And I'm going to misrepresent, or I'm going to represent what I think you've been saying, and then you're going to correct me, and then we're going to discuss it. So it seems like you're saying that PHEVs don't make sense because the range is too small, and that electric cars with less than a couple of 100 miles of range don't really make sense because the range is too small.
Yes, those are two separate issues.
Yes.
Let's set the plug-in hybrids aside for the moment and just talk about battery electrics. Very few people ever get rich or even sustain a business selling products that tell consumers what you want is the wrong thing. You shouldn't want what you want because what you need is this lesser thing. And it is pretty clear that it's a very hard sell to sell a 74-mile EV, or for that matter, a 125-mile EV. There is some number of miles out there. I tend to think the minimum is 200. GM has said on the record they think it's sort of 300 where people stop worrying about range. And yes, most people are not going to drive their EVs 200 or 300 miles a day. Right. On average, they're going to drive, 80% of them are going to drive less than 40 miles a day. It doesn't matter. People have to be able to say, okay, 300 miles, I get that. I can imagine using a car with 300 miles of range in my life. I cannot imagine using a car with 70 miles of range for the same reason that not very many people ever bought smarts. Very few people sit down and say to their better half, honey, I think what we need to do is go out and spend tens of thousands of dollars on a small car with limited usage that only meets some of our needs. They just don't. Most car buyers don't think that way. A small portion do, but most don't. So I think going forward with anomalies like the Mazda MX-30, which is blatantly a compliance car, and the Mini Cooper SE, I think it's called, both of which have ranges around 100 miles. Those are going to be low volume specialty EVs, fine, whatever. For the mass market, the compact crossovers and above, I think you have to have above 200 miles, 250, it may be the functional minimum, 300 gets people over the hump. So that's the battery electric piece of our discussion.
Hasn't the car industry been successful over the last few decades at shaping consumer perceptions pretty much along the lines that they want to shape them? I'm sorry. In fact, let me rephrase that. I think one of the common problems in electric, when it comes to electric vehicles, is that the car companies say, we'll build them when people demand them. Well, people demanded them. And, you know, the idea that people had to petition the car companies to make something. And then the idea that in fact, it's really the millions and millions and millions of dollars that the car companies spend marketing their products that shape public opinion. Public opinion, I mean, everybody has their own opinions, but it is hugely influenced by all of the materials, whether it's print or television or internet. And there's a reason these companies spend tens of millions of dollars, maybe hundreds of millions of dollars on marketing and advertising. The idea that EV education has to be organic and sort of come up from the ground and bubble up without any car company being disposed to say, you know what, we need to spend some money on this. We need to educate people. The Chargeway thing is certainly a step, and I'll give them credit for that. But I guess what I'm saying is these perceptions that hold back shorter range EVs, when they might be right for other people, when there might be, even if it's albeit a small group of people, but it might be a decent product for some people. But the idea that no, it's not right for everybody, so we got to throw it out.
There's several different points to unpack in that.
Yeah, I mean, you've talked to me before, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, I'm sorry.
Fair point.
Apologies in advance, Mr. Voelcker.
Okay, so clearly the auto industry has not done a whole lot effective, sustained, or interesting and compelling to market EVs, in part because they were niche products for their first 10 years, and they require more education. And as Chelsea Sexton likes to say, you cannot sell a car as medicine. You can't sell a car as something that's good for you or good for the planet. As I have said before, screw the polar bears. That is not going to sell cars. You have to market cars in the same way. You have to market electric cars in the same way you market any other car. It's cool. It has features that you can imagine using in your life, even if you didn't know that you wanted them until someone talked to you about them, et cetera, et cetera.
Sure.
And I think the car industry is starting to do this. Ford has had an immense amount of attention for saying its upcoming F-150 Lightning can power your house for 3 days. That is something that no gasoline car will do, absent some really Goldberg dangerous kinds of generator hookups, etc. And it is something where people say, oh, that's something an electric car could do that I can imagine myself using. They miss all the asterisks, of course, about it has to be the top level, the biggest battery pack, and you have to do some substantial rewiring of your house to make it happen. But that's a compelling thing for electric cars. And there will be other sorts of things for that as well. Did my video just freeze? This happens.
It's been freezing intermittently, but it'll unfreeze.
Yeah, it comes back. Anyway, so yes, I think the auto industry has not done a good job educating people about EVs, but I also think they haven't done a good job on making EVs compelling and sexy and cool, which is essentially where Tesla came in without actually running ads. Teslas are sleek. Most of them are good looking. They're fast. They're the kind of thing that people like in cars, or some people. And, you know, I've said this before, but people forget that historically, over 125 years, the auto industry, innovation has come in at the top and filtered down.
Right.
The electric self-starter was first fitted to a Cadillac, not a Chevy. And, you know, air conditioning, automatic transmission, disc brakes, turbochargers, you name it, all that stuff comes in at the top, either luxury cars or sports cars, which can justify the prices of expensive new technology, and then it filters down. Nissan, with its Leaf, followed the Prius model, which may well have been a mistake, as opposed to making an Infiniti, you know, top of the line Infiniti that was electric, that was much more of a Tesla clone. And so, you know, electric cars had this drawback where it was easier to make a small compact hatchback electric because it's lighter and smaller than a big, heavy luxury sedan, but you can't get the prices for it. And people looked at it and said, oh, well, here's a Nissan Versa for $18,500 and here's a Nissan Leaf for $33,000. Why am I buying electric again? And, you know, so there have been some missteps in the first product lineups. Those are being rectified for the second decade of EVs. But you are correct on the data that most people don't need 200 or 300 miles of range. I have always said, and this, I have tweeted this multiple times, you know, that doesn't matter.
Right.
People do not buy cars rationally. Fleet managers theoretically buy cars rationally, which is why Ford's e-Transit is only going to have, I think, 140 miles of range, because they found that the average distance driven by a transit van in fleet usage was, I don't know, 71 miles or something. So double that. That covers most of their niche. You know, we don't buy cars rationally. We buy 3-ton pickup trucks with 6.7-liter turbo diesel engines to be able to tow 14,000 pounds of trailer and the boat that we hope one day we will buy. America.
And then we just end up not being able to get into the parking place at the grocery store.
Correct.
Yeah.
Correct. we also talked about plug-in hybrids, and I want to hit that because I don't have an inherent bias against plug-in hybrids if they're done right. And I think the Chevy Volt was done right. The Volt, when it went out of production, had 53 miles of electric range, and GM had data and shared it that said 80-odd% of miles driven in Volts came from grid electricity, not from burning gasoline. Perfect. Now extend that up to other classes of vehicles. The Volt went off the market because GM thinks in the end, two separate powertrains is not the right approach. Some other makers differ, but right now you have the Toyota RAV4 Prime, which has 42 miles of range and is in the much more popular compact crossover niche. Perfect. Here's the problem. You have to plug in an electric car. The only way to power a battery electric car is via grid electricity, okay? What disturbs me about the bulk of plug-in hybrids on the market today is that they are low range, as you indicated. You know, the Europeans put out years and years of 9-mile and 11-mile, 14-mile plug-in hybrids. You know, it's really kind of not worth it, especially because a lot of the early ones, if you breathe too hard in your right lung, your right foot moved a 16th of an inch and the engine turned on. So there are good plug-in hybrids and there are bad plug-in hybrids. Those ones were clearly compliance cars for the European market. Then Europe changed its standards. But more than that, the problem with plug-in hybrids is there is no guarantee that anyone ever plugs the damn things in. GM has provided data, so did Ford on its energy lineup, but a colleague has asked Toyota for data on do people plug in Prius Primes and RAV4 Primes. Toyota, beep. I asked Jeep because I reviewed the Wrangler plug-in hybrid, and Jeep said several times, we don't provide that data. My theory is, if a manufacturer is not willing to share the plugging in behavior of the owners of the plug-in hybrids that it is selling, it is reasonable to suspect that people are not plugging them in. And there's an auto writer named Adam Tong who randomly interviewed a neighbor who showed up with a Wrangler 4xe or 4xe. And Adam's like, wow, you bought a plug-in hybrid. And she said, what? And he said, it's you plug this in and you get electricity. And she said, oh, really? No one ever said anything about that. I got it because it was the cheapest lease. She had no idea. No one at the dealer had told her. There was nothing visible on the car except
why make the sale complicated?
Yeah. And the automakers get the credit and for selling a vehicle that theoretically has lower tailpipe emissions and less carbon, and the buyer gets the federal income tax credit and state credits for buying one, even if it's never plugged in. So okay, go.
Yeah. Well, so if Toyota suddenly graced your email box and said, John, we've heard your pleas and here's the data. We know that our plug-in hybrids are grid charged 75% of the time. Would that change your opinion?
Yeah.
Okay.
I am not against
the
properly
product.
Designed plug-in hybrids, which have more, let's set a number. Maybe 35, that was the original Volt, but in the EU, they're now talking about 50 kilometers, which is 30 miles, being up to 80 kilometers, which is about 50 miles, as the minimal plug-in hybrid range on their new tougher test regime to get any kind of credits. The data do show, as far as we can tell, and this is more European data, the longer the electric range of your plug-in hybrid, the more likely it is to be plugged in. Which is to say, I don't think anyone ever plugged in a plug-in Prius, which had 11 miles of range.
The first one. Oh,
that was sold as a really nicely equipped standard Prius hybrid with a sweet, sweet tax credit.
There's a fairly legendary story about me with a carload of Toyota executives driving the prototype plug-in. And getting the driveway out of the Toyota campus in Torrance and getting onto Western Boulevard and immediately kicking it into ice mode. Oops.
That was an extremely cynical vehicle.
It was a horrible vehicle. And I think even
it got them their credits. They sold just enough of them to tick all the regulatory boxes.
But the new Prime is a great car. And I'm going to say without any data that I don't know that it's fair to judge the first generation plug-in against the Prius Prime, because I have no data. So, but I'm willing to bet that most of those owners plug those things in and do use them mostly on electric mode.
What makes you think that?
The Prime owners that I know.
Non-representative data set.
No argument there. No, like I said, I have no data. I have no, but.
Well, and the fact that the automaker will not provide that data does not give me confidence. I am perfectly willing to be persuaded that a plug-in hybrid that starts out all electric, as the Prius Prime does, and as the RAV4 Prime does, and as the Volt always did.
Well, it is switchable.
Yeah, well, you can conserve battery range. Yeah.
Yes.
But the default, at least when I tested it in 2016 when it came out, the default on the Prius Prime was
electric.
If it was charged up, it's electric until it runs low.
Correct. You had to hit a button to get out of that mode. Yes.
So if it's electric from the start when charged, and if it has some minimal range, 25 miles in 2016, but now probably, let's say 40.
32.
Something somewhere in there, meaningful enough where people have a chance of doing most of their daily miles on electricity, and the manufacturer is willing to show that people actually plug it in, then in fact I am perfectly happy to say plug-in hybrids are a good temporary solution until every electric car with 300 miles of battery is so cheap that you would be dumb to buy anything else. Now, what's interesting is I have heard rumblings. The California Air Resources Board, CARB, is in the process of figuring out what its advanced clean car standards are going to be from 2026 to 2035, which is when the governor said sales of light-duty vehicles with combustion engines will end. Okay? So how do you get from here to there? Because we're fast coming up on 2025, which was the end of the last set. So ACC2, as it's known, there's a lot of sausage being made. I am not privy to those discussions, but I had heard that there is at least some consideration of giving strong plug-in hybrids, which is to say those with 40 or 50 miles of range, or 50 or 60 miles of range, electric range, dubbing them essentially zero emission vehicles if the vehicles download once a year their charging behavior.
I like that.
I think that's a superb solution.
I love that idea.
Once again, you know who's behind the Strong Plug-in Hybrid Coalition, or one of the people. Our friend Chelsea Sexton.
Yeah, absolutely.
So in that case, there's a lot going on regulatorily, but I think the regulators have noticed that low-range plug-in hybrids probably don't deserve the credits, all of the advantages and incentives that they get. And so it makes sense to say, if you want regulatory credit and or taxpayer funds used for incentives, they have to be meaningful plug-in hybrids, whether that's 40 or 50 or 60 miles.
Let me interject one question. So what's better for the world, for us, the globe, the climate, whatever, if someone buys a Prius Prime or someone buys a new Camry? I'm not saying there's a one-to-one there, but someone buys a gas sedan or they buy a PHEV.
Even if they never plug in the plug-in hybrid, it's going to have better gas mileage. I think the more appropriate question is standard Prius versus Prius Prime.
Interesting.
Okay?
Why is that?
Well, because by saying Camry, you are taking a car that is significantly less efficient to start with. Maybe Camry hybrid would be better, but a Prius hybrid versus a Prius plug-in hybrid seems the best and most likely alternative decision.
I guess what I was thinking here is though that moving people into PHEVs, even ones with admittedly limited range, which aren't ideal and may be vehicles just designed to get carb credits, to get tax credits, is still better than having someone buy an ICE sedan.
Yes, but someone who is buying a midsize sedan like a Camry is not very likely to buy a strange-looking compact hatchback.
A Prime, sure.
So, if there is a Camry Prime, an ICE Camry, and a Camry hybrid, and frankly, every second Lyft and Uber car in New York City is a Camry hybrid.
Interesting.
Then I think, you have your choice of gasoline alone, hybrid, and plug-in hybrid. If the plug-in hybrid is not plugged in, it's incrementally more efficient than the regular hybrid, but we're talking, saving a fraction of a gallon per 100 miles. I would argue that one of the roles of plug-in hybrids is the gateway drug to battery electric cars.
Sure.
And we've talked about this before. But again, people got to know they can plug them in, and they have to plug them in and get the electric benefit to understand. And then it starts to be a game. How can I not turn on the gasoline?
Right, exactly. How can I extend my MPGE? I hate that.
Oh, look, there's a plug over there that the gardener uses. Maybe I can park on the lawn and plug in for 10 minutes. That kind of thing. So,
sure.
Yeah, plug-in hybrids absolutely have a role if, in fact, they do what they're supposed to be doing, which is running electric. I just have not seen the data, and I get irritated at the assumption across the board that, well, it's a plug-in hybrid, so of course everybody plugs it in.
Guilty as charged. I'll own that.
All right.
That's my assumption. I think most owners probably plug them in. Now, the question is my anecdote better than the Wrangler anecdote? I don't know.
Yeah, I don't either. There isn't any data, but I'm not willing to make that assumption because I'm an increasingly cynical elderly journalist.
Well, and you're a journalist and I'm not. You're driven by facts. I'm not.
But you're an influencer.
Not really even that. I'm just a guy with a show and a microphone. I guess. I mean, maybe. Yeah, I sure would. No, actually, I hate that word.
I know I was pulling your leg a little bit.
Yeah, no, thank you. Just call me an SOB. It's better that way,
I'm sure I don't know such language, so
I just bristle at influencer for some reason. It just makes me think that I should be selling dangerous products to tweens, like.
I'm not sure two silver-haired guys talking about influencers is going to do anything. Yeah. So moving right along.
Fair enough. But you know what? I realize that we're probably running up against time here, and I wanted to, just because you get to review so much stuff, what you like, what you don't like. Specifically, Danny Cooper and I were talking about the Maverick this morning, and I think you just drive the Maverick?
I did actually. I just on the Car Connection published a 3-truck comparo. Not something I do a whole lot, but it was the Nissan Frontier, which no longer has the oldest doors in the business because it was a 2004 truck, I think, up until this year. And they've done a very comprehensive refresh. It's, up to date. The Frontier was the easiest. It sort of is what it is. It's a mid-size pickup truck, and they've sort of butched it up a little bit to be more Tacoma-y with lots of off-roading and all that. But it will still be used by small tradespeople.
Yep.
They will sell a bucket load of them in white to fleets, etc. So then there was the Hyundai Santa Cruz, which is an SUV-derived sort of sleek and flowing pickup truckette. And they
I like to
say
think of it as a brat for the 2020s.
not all that far off. I get the Brat, the Ram Charger, the Volkswagen Rabbit pickup, the Subaru Baja Brat 2.
Yeah.
None of which stayed in production. So, Hyundai says they have identified the same young active couples who rock climb and explore and want experiences, etc., who increasingly find that their gear, be it mountain bikes or kayaks or sailboards or sweaty hiking clothes or whatever, doesn't comfortably fit in a compact crossover. So this is essentially 2/3 of a compact crossover, but with an open bed. And the idea is that's going to be what some portion of them will buy. I think Hyundai doesn't expect to sell hundreds of thousands of them. It's also, interestingly, the first product Hyundai has ever designed for North America specifically.
Interesting. I didn't know.
I'm sort of shocked. They've been in the market for decades.
Yeah.
This is their first North American product. So, but to the Maverick, which you asked about, I think the Maverick is going to be a massive success. Ford knows trucks really well, and they understand that there was a big market for the old Ranger, the one up through 2012, not the current Ranger, which has grown into a mid-size pickup, but the old compact Ranger. And this is essentially the modern interpretation of the old compact Ranger. It's a 4-door truck. You can't get it in a 2-person version with a 4-foot bed, but they really understand how people use trucks, and the tailgate goes in 2 positions, so it can be flat, but it can also be slightly tilted, so you can hang the 4x8 plywood over the back. They've done things like putting slots in the bed and telling you cut a 2x6 to this dimension, so you can slot them into the bed, and you can have a 2-level bed. There's a lot of stuff like that. They even put in a junction in the wiring, so as one of the Ford guys said, we will sell you LED bed lights that run under the rails, but click this QR code and we'll give you videos and instructions on how to make your own bed lights for $50 instead of whatever they charge. And they put a connector in the wires for you to plug them into. So this is really thinking about how people use trucks, what that particular audience is going to want. They're actually selling caps. There's a sort of a recreational cap, and then there's a commercial cap, which is bigger and tougher and doesn't have windows. And, like anything else, they will make much of their money on the accessories, the upsells, the higher trim levels. But It does start at $19.95 with the proviso that their delivery fee is an unconscionable $1,500. But the base Maverick at $19,995 plus delivery, front-wheel drive only, but it's the hybrid. So you're talking mid-30s fuel economy, right?
Is that what you got?
Yeah, I didn't have it long enough to do totally representative driving, but they did load a pallet of mulch, 1,000 pounds of mulch into the back of a hybrid, and I drove it on the freeway and everything else, and it worked fine.
Wow.
Yeah.
The reason I say that is, again, talking to Danny this morning, he was like, the Maverick's like Gen 1 Prius MPG. And I was like, I didn't know that, actually.
Yeah.
That's impressive.
Yeah.
For a $19,000 truck.
40 miles a gallon city for the hybrid. Now, can't get the hybrid in all-wheel drive. If you want all-wheel drive, you have to go to the EcoBoost engine.
Sure.
All right. If you want the towing capability, the 4,000 pounds of towing, you have to go to the EcoBoost. And I think there was a towing package and all-wheel drive. But for the people, especially in southern climates who don't need all-wheel drive for weather, the front drive one is fine. The hybrid will give them good gas economy, and it's not a slug. The Maverick is one of those vehicles that you just look at and think that's going to do well.
Yeah. I was shocked. But I was also happy to see a truck that wasn't an enormous school bus size vehicle. That's that the blowing up of truck sizes is one of my new problems.
Russell, why do you hate America?
You know, because I'm un-American, John. I don't know. Yeah. I just like the new LX that was debuted yesterday. Oh,
Oh, you
yeah.
mean the angry vacuum cleaner that wants
Thank
to eat
you.
your children?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, like, I like at first the whale shark Lexus front end, when I saw that years ago, I was like, oh, I don't know. And I kind of saw
spindle grill, as they call it.
the spindle. Well, I like to think of it as whale shark, but yeah, that's fine. Spindle, I'm sure. I saw that LX and I went, oh, just put spikes on all the lug nuts and maybe like just stop. I don't. It seems really inappropriate for Lexus, but what do you like? What have you driven that you like?
Love the Rivian.
Yeah. Oh, I'm jealous.
Yeah, that was, I mean, it's probably a good tactic to do your test drive at 9,300 feet because the entire automotive media are oxygen deprived for 2 days. But
it's an interesting point.
I was surprised how much emphasis they put on the trucks off-roading, because I mean, we had 60 miles of trails, gravel, hill climbing up to 12,000 feet, et cetera, et cetera. And then, oh, by the way, we can drive on the freeway too. So I think probably 35 miles would have done it. But, they really wanted to underscore that this is a real truck. They've thought through what real trucks are sometimes asked to do, and it sort of eradicates any trace of wimpiness, even if Rivians, much like Teslas, are largely going to be driven as family vehicles or single-person commuting vehicles in upscale suburbs.
How many people with $7,000 Rolex dive watches don't even get in the deep end of the pool?
Right. So in that sense, I think Rivian wanted to tick all the boxes on authenticity, what trucks do.
Yep.
I have some quibbles with it.
Really?
So the front end styling, I hated when it first came out, and now I'm totally used to it. It's a Rivian, fine, whatever. What I think I found the most perplexing, and really not the right call, is they wanted a clean interior, and the materials in the interior on some of the trim packages are really lovely. They've done interesting things with fabrics, with wood, and it's a look. Remember when Volvo came out in 2016 with the new XC90, and people sort of looked at it and said, wow, they have redefined luxury in a way no one's quite done it.
Yep.
This is a little bit the same thing for trucks. It's not your, King Ranch Ford or whatever. It's not a GMC, Denali, etc. It's their own definition. It's also worth saying the Rivian is a mid-size truck. It is not a full-size pickup. It maps pretty neatly to the Ranger, the Frontier, the Tacoma, that class of truck, which is fine. The problem I had with it is that because they wanted a clean interior, not only do you adjust the door mirrors via the screen and then your thumb wheels, which you don't want to be doing at speed, you adjust the vents the same way. I'm not the only auto journalist who fiddles with vents, and I don't think I'm the only driver who fiddles with vents.
Constantly.
You want to cool yourself down, and then you don't want the cold air, so you redirect it. That was really, to me, a fundamental miscalculation. But if that's the biggest thing from a new company launching their first real vehicle, that's not so bad. And, any member of the press is going to say it's really wonderful to have the entire team who made the decisions all sitting there eating with you at picnic tables. Plus, I don't know, but a lot of people didn't catch this. All the food for the press drive for 4 waves, I think it was cooked on the electric stoves that are a Rivian option powered by the batteries. That's a neat trick.
Sure. And that kitchen that pulls out of the tunnel is killer. It's amazing.
The woman who designed it is proud of it, as she should be. She had the interesting prior job of working for Jaguar Special Vehicles Research Unit, the hot rods, and her job was to break things.
You obviously had an interesting dinner conversation with her.
Oh yeah, they were good conversations, and so Rivian gets points for putting the execs out there for sort of saying, okay, fine, we're ready to talk now. Here it all is. Ask us any questions. So I like the Rivian, like the Maverick. Car-wise, I'm waiting to drive the Hyundai Ioniq 5, which
Yeah.
I think isn't going to arrive till the end of the year, and the Kia EV6, which will arrive next spring, because I think those will amp up the category that right now has the Model Y, the Volkswagen ID4, and the Mach-E in it. And if you go from 3 cars, all of which are fairly different, to 5 cars that can be bucketed into compact crossovers, you have a really competitive category.
Finally, some interesting. Lucid?
Have not driven a Lucid.
Okay.
Couldn't unfortunately make their factory event.
Mm.
But I hope to soon.
Yeah.
And they look stunning. I was actually at an event where I got possibly the only picture in the universe of a Lucid Air in gold with a second generation Toyota Mirai, as I titled it, the EV Unicorn Parade.
The second generation Mirai,
which is much nicer looking than the first one, which was hideous.
And every bit is pointless.
Yes.
Every bit is pointless. I actually like the Mirai, but it doesn't make any sense on hydrogen. But that's not even a conversation to have.
No inherent complaint about hydrogen vehicles as vehicles. I'm sure that the second generation Mirai is a very good car. The challenge is that we have now spent, or more accurately, California's taxpayers have now spent $100 million, for which they were promised 100 hydrogen fueling stations throughout the state by 2020. Not only did that now happen, but you can go on the real-time station status app from the California Fuel Cell Partnership and see that on any given morning, between 18 and 30 hydrogen stations of the 40 odd that actually exist in the state are working. Are
offline. San Diego County, one of the largest counties in California, which has some big counties. One station. One station. I don't know how that doesn't make any sense. Like for a consumer
talked to the Honda Clarity drivers and Mirai drivers who had to garage their cars for months in the San Francisco Bay Area because the one hydrogen supply unit in the Bay Area blew up or had a fire. And so they were trucking in 1 or 2 truckloads of hydrogen a day from Southern California. And people were waking up at 2 a.m. to get in line to fuel their cars.
Crazy.
Yeah. So now hydrogen is supposedly going to be applied to very large trucks. I think the challenge is the models today say, well, it works for trucks that cover more than 300 miles at a crack. Let's look at where batteries were 10 years ago, where batteries are today. Where do we think batteries will be 10 years from now? And is that 300-mile barrier all of a sudden 500 miles above which hydrogen is practical? That's a very small piece of the heavy truck market, because what people forget is we all have trucker fantasies of driving something from California to Texas or, Oregon to Maine or whatever.
Right.
That's a minority of the Class 8 truck turns. A lot of them are hauling trailers from ports to distribution warehouses, or distribution warehouses to client distribution warehouses, to individual dealers, etc. There's a lot of short haul trips where the tractor sits around in between for a while. So whether or not there is actually enough of a market for hydrogen heavy commercial vehicles is a moving target. But that's where the hydrogen thing seems to be focusing these days.
Wow. Well, in a chance to wrap it up, is there anything that you'd like to plug? Anything you want to mention? Any topic that we haven't that you just want to get your shot in?
Oh, do you want the list chronologically, alphabetically, or the 228 slide version?
I have all afternoon, Mr. Voelcker. I am more than happy to sit here and be regaled.
I appreciate that. why don't we do it again? I'm trying to think. No, really, honestly, for me personally, I'm now writing regularly for Car and Driver, which
Yeah.
is for me a huge thing, just because, as I've said, I have been reading that magazine longer than both of my assigning editors have been alive. So it's nice finally to have a byline, and I think even my mother is starting to believe that maybe I'm gainfully employed.
Oh, maybe.
Maybe.
Maybe they just send you a gift basket. Maybe they send you a check. Who knows?
Well, no, maybe I just randomly steal cars and drive for a week, including when I visit her. But anyway, so no, I look for my articles there and on the Drive and a variety of other outlets, Charged EVs. But no, to circle back to where we started.
Yes, sir.
The fact that the National Association of Car Dealers, the National Auto Dealers Association, is finally starting to grapple with the fact that they're not very good. Their members are not very good at selling EVs. I think is a hugely important thing, and it is optional for dealers to use the Chargeway system. But sooner or later, the dealers who won't sell EVs are being weeded out. Everyone's sort of, oh my God, Cadillac is losing 20% of its dealers or whatever the number is because they don't want to sell electric cars. Cadillac had way too many dealers to start with.
Thank you. Yep.
Some of their dealers were selling 4 or 5 cars a month. That's idiotic.
Oh.
And so, the dealers that survive will be bigger. They will have different footprints, and they're going to have to learn how to sell EVs. So I think this is a positive step.
I hope so. That's good. And again, just because Matt's a good guy and he's worked really hard for years at something that who knew if it was ever going to be taken seriously,
Well, and he was trying to put together pieces that no one else was putting together, not just how to explain charging sort of at a retail level, but where's the pain point and who will pay money to get that education. And dealers saw it and they're like, oh, good, we don't have to figure it out. This lets us educate ourselves and educate the clients at the same time. Oh, and there's a phone app so they can carry that knowledge out and do it. And oh, we can plug it into our websites. So I think, I can't think of any other business anywhere in the EV ecosystem that brings those pieces together.
Yeah. No, it's good to see, and it's good for consumers. Hopefully now they'll be able to go in. Well, hopefully soon they'll be able to go into a dealer and learn a little bit if they're open to it. And that could be good for us as a country.
From your mouth to the goddess's ears.
Thank you, John Voelcker. I appreciate you coming on the show, spending an hour with us. And I look forward to, in fact, maybe right after I end this, we should just make the next time.
Oh, absolutely.
That's like me getting you to commit on air, right? Like that was so nasty. I'm sorry, John, but thanks very much, John. To see him in Car and Driver, at the Drive, all over the place where fine auto journalism is featured. Thank you for watching. Tune in soon and find out what drives us.